The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Better Edge. Visit betteredge.com right now. Grab the app in the iOS App Store and use code SPOTTRACK at registration for $20 on the house and get cranking on those Super Bowl bets from A to Z. That's code SPOTTRACK, SPOTRAC, at betteredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. Tuesday, February 3rd, we're at Super Bowl week. We're not at the Super Bowl, but we are in Super Bowl week. Cranking out plenty of content, football-related, baseball-related, off-season related, Super Bowl-related. Feel free to follow us on the socials at Spot Track, at YouTube. Find the Spot Track Podcast. Hopefully you're watching this right now. Hit that subscribe button, and we will continue to crank out video content, including NFL contract breakdowns as they become available in the coming weeks, because we are at that point in time. It is extension season for some of those internal players who are in need. We're going to talk about plenty of those players right now. Top free agents in the NFL, franchise tag candidates in the NFL. We had a nice trade in baseball yesterday we'll get to. And on the back end, a little bit of turmoil with the World Baseball Classic as rosters are finalized in 2 days. And teams are certainly coming together collectively for that classic within about a month away now. So some drama could lead to some real discourse with a team or two. We'll touch on that at the back end of the show with Dan Soemann. He's up next. All right, Dan, a couple things on the docket today. A couple NFL items, a couple baseball items, and we'll get back to our daily duties. Let's start with some futures. It's a really tough conversation this year, this franchise tag stuff. And I don't think the majority of people are there yet from a mindset standpoint, but it is February and we are about 10 days away from this thing opening up, this window. We have a closer range on what the salary cap is going to be. That came out last Thursday, somewhere in that 302 to 303 mark. So we were pretty close with our year-long 304 projection here, which means we can do a little bit tougher, closer, more concise calculations for what these tags, these tenders, and things like that are going to look like. Before I bring up the list, and I stretched hard to get a list together for this, where do you think this lands this year? Because the numbers are fairly high. I don't think anybody's getting value out of a franchise tag this year. Let's put it that way. But do you have off the top of your head, without doing any research or even knowing this topic was going to exist this morning, do you have a name that we should start with because you think that the tag is going to be applicable here?
Not really, no.
Right. And last year there were names and we only found our way to 2. So if we start with that conversation, I still think we'll get a couple. I do think Daniel Jones is on track for the franchise tag. Now, there's 9 ways to look at that conversation. The financials are ugly, kind of however you slice it. And based on what we know with the salary cap now, Dan, that's a $47 million, almost $48 million tender, which is what we have to call it. It's a placeholder right now. But in, let's say March 9th, or I think the window is March 5th, early March, whenever that tag window closes. If Indianapolis decides they're going this route, they're going to have to account for that 47 and change on their books when the league year starts on March 11th. So it's risky in that regard. And I think all parties have different ideas for how this all shakes out by week 1, but that's obviously the biggest enchilada sitting out there. Are you of the mindset? Because, by the way, it didn't happen for Daniel Jones when he was in this situation with the Giants, if you remember. He finished his 5th year, walked into free agency. There were offers, ended up coming back on a 4 for 160 with the Giants. There was not a tag placeholder prior to that whole offseason going down. What happens with Daniel Jones in Indianapolis in the next couple of weeks here, Dan, in your opinion?
Honestly, I don't know. I similar to you, I think we thought it was kind of a slam dunk, and then now we're more recently hearing it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much a slam dunk, which would make sense just at like the sheer number for quarterbacks. Plus, if there are injury concerns, coming off of his injury from last year. We did see things fall apart kind of towards the end before he got injured a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's concerns.
So I think the right way to look at this, and we won't spend too much time on it because there's a lot to get to, but the only right way to look at this is, what is the risk of him walking into the open market 4 p.m. March 11th, or even, March 9th with these negotiations, and having multiple teams want his services at prices that he would accept? Obviously, I mean, somebody's going to throw out something low ball, similar to what Minnesota probably tried to do last year, etc. But what are the likely, with the injury stuff, with what you saw through week 8 or whatever it was when he went through this, where do you think we stand on, certain teams, Miami, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, just to name a few off the top of my head, the Jets, that might be looking for 1 or 2 year bridge guys, which I still think is the right conversation for Daniel Jones. Are we there? Is it a risk for Indianapolis to let him walk into that market, or do you think it's a little bit too discombobulated, a little bit too complicated to really have that kind of concern?
I have no idea what they'll do, but I wouldn't be too concerned with letting him test and see where things go. It seems
right.
It's not always great options on the market, but I mean, he was not that coveted beyond a couple landing spots last year. I don't think he did anything to totally change that outcome. So I would just say they should let him test the market, and if he walks on a sizable deal, then they'll find another backfill.
Let's talk about the other, because I do think that's the other side of this, right? Is what's Daniel Jones' market / availability / interest from other teams. But now what are the other options? We've got Aaron Rodgers. It's one more year at Pittsburgh or nothing, right? I can't imagine there's another team sitting out there thinking that A, Aaron Rodgers would accept a deal with them, and B, that's their best course of action right now. So he's certainly the name out there. And then in terms of true free agents, I think the only other name worth a damn is Malik Willis. And Dan, I've been doing thousands of hours worth of NFL free agency work and extension work and bubble work, and I'm not seeing this. What am I missing with Malik Willis that has, people on ESPN screaming $40 million on March 11th for a player that has a 9-game sample size? Sure, his QBR is nice. He appears to be an efficient quarterback, but this guy had more than enough chances early on in his career. And maybe he's the next coming of Sam Darnold. And I hope, but I love this story more than I've loved many NFL stories. So I'm hoping that's the case. What am I missing? And is he a viable 1B QB starting option on this market with Daniel Jones? Are you there?
I mean, I want to see, I wouldn't mind him going to one of these question mark spots and getting some playing time, knowing that if, halfway into the season, it's not working, then they can move in a different direction. But
40 million? Where are these numbers? These are real people saying this stuff. That's why I'm kind of throwing it out there right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be surprised at that in that range.
What capacity of Justin Fields 2 for 40 should we not be learning from right now? It's easily one of the worst contracts of this offseason. They're going to be eating $10 million. Geno Smith, similar. Easily one of the worst contracts of last offseason. They're going to be eating $18 million. Those are 2 other available names, by the way, we can get to here in a second if we need to. But I just don't understand why anybody would go from 0 to 150 with Malik Willis after the sample size, after the track record out of 8 out of 10 of these quarterbacks. Baker started at 1 for 4 in Tampa Bay. Sam Darnold started at 1 for 4 in San Francisco, jumped up to 1 for 10 in Minnesota. Okay. Daniel Jones went from a practice squad in Minnesota to a 1 for 14 in Indianapolis. Why would Malik Willis, of all these players, go from minimum salary to $25 million a year for 2 years? What am I missing? I don't get it.
No, I don't have an explanation for that either. I'm just saying purely from the premise. I mean, I kind of want to see more, price tag aside. But yeah, I'm with you.
Is Daniel Jones a $40 million player in 2026? Either via the tag that he ends up signing or via some sort of contract, 1 year, 2 year, multi-year? Doesn't sound like it's a risk you would take.
No, I mean, I have concerns. I mean, I've been on here talking about how I don't think he's the worst quarterback
Sure.
in the NFL. Like the narrative was not so long ago. But I mean, I also am not foolish enough to think he's some reborn quarterback all of a sudden, right? He's got flaws. In the right situation, he can be successful, but that doesn't necessarily make him a top of the market quarterback, in my opinion.
Okay. One more question. We took way too long. It's okay. Is there a world where he's the next Sam Darnold, though? Is he that kind of player, Dan?
Yeah, potentially, but
Yeah.
I think lost in the shuffle of the Sam Darnold mix is he went to places like great landing spots for his
For sure.
career. Same with Baker, after getting out of Carolina, it's going to take that for him to succeed. Same thing with Malik Willis. He's going to have, if he lands in the right spot, then he could very well turn into a valuable quarterback down the line. If he just goes to, a dysfunctional organization that is trying to figure it out, I mean, it may very well look like the Justin Fields contract. So
Off the top of your head, what is the best destination for any of these quarterbacks we're talking about right now? Is it Indy? Let's say Miami's in this conversation, the Jets, Steelers. I guess we have to fringe put Minnesota because they admitted out loud that they've made a mistake. The Arizona Cardinals are in this conversation. And to some degree, I'm going to add the Rams to this conversation too, Dan, because I don't think that's crazy for, a 2 to 3 year span here.
I guess I haven't really thought through the potential landing spots, but all of those make sense. I also am in agreement. The Rams are not moving on from Matthew Stafford, but going to have their eyes set on what life looks like beyond that.
Especially because McVay and Snead got extensions. That's not a nothing announcement. That is a pre-free agency. Hey, just letting you know, this is not an all-in 2026 organization. We're going to try to win the Super Bowl, and we're going to try to do it for the next 3 to 5 years. So that was not a nothing burger,
Mm-hmm. For sure. So I have nothing more to add. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating that we are seeing these resuscitation stories quite a bit, and I could see Daniel Jones getting there. I'd love to see Malik. I'd love to be having this conversation about Malik Willis next year. I think it would be absolute roster, cash, ownership, front office suicide to give him a 2-year guarantee that we're seeing just fizzle left and right and up and down. You've got to put these players on incentive-laden 1-year contracts. And by the way, the player should want that too. Because if the player does what Daniel Jones just did, if the player does what Sam Darnold did last year in Minnesota, there is $60 million guaranteed sitting in front of you. So you should want this 1-year showcase along with the starting competition. Those things go hand in hand. This position does not need financial security, outside of the window that you're in. You can maximize your financial security on 1 year and get more next year if you play your cards right. The position is more powerful than the optics in this regard. That's why you're going to see Geno Smith get a chance to start again, even though he had a miserable season. You're going to see Kyler Murray probably get traded this year and get a chance to start wherever that is. And there's a possibility where Tua is in the same boat. It's just where we are with this position right now. And it's a weird draft class, so I don't expect there to be too much influx from the backfill either. So it's fascinating. I don't have anything else really quarterback-wise. It's going to be a down year in terms of free agency. We're going to have some players fall off. There's some trade candidates that I just mentioned there quickly. We can throw the Deshaun Watson stuff back into orbit as we need to. I think it's more likely he's starting for Cleveland than he's traded or recklessly released or anything like that. But that's kind of the quarterback situation here. So back to the franchise tags quickly, Dan. I'm going to give you my answer. I don't think he gets the tag. I believe that there's been enough conversation behind the scenes with these two parties that it's a real big march for this team. because I do think there's a chance where outside of the Rams, which are fringe, that this Indy team as a whole and what could happen over the course of the next 3 months could be the most attractive landing spot for not just Jones returning, but for plenty of these free agents who are looking to be, looking to find the next New England Patriots story. We're looking for a team who kind of likes themselves internally and is going to spend aggressively to get to a point where they can be legitimate AFC contenders. I do think that could be this Colts roster. Now they're set to lose some players, but you put that $47 million tag on the books at the end of February, and you have limited your ability to be aggressive on March 9th when those phone conversations start happening. So I think there's probably going to be a mutual situation where obviously they want the guy to return, but they're probably going to have to let him test the market, as you kind of alluded to, and see what's out there. And, we'll see how aggressive Minnesota wants to be. We'll see what Pittsburgh and certainly the Jets have to offer with this position. But moving on quickly, this one seems like a slam dunk. This could be the only actual franchise tag we get in 2026. And that's George Pickens with the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones has said it. I think a $28 million price tag for George Pickens right now, even as a placeholder, feels right. And I would expect him to be around that on a multi-year extension, probably about 30. The Brandon Ayuk contract that will soon be no more is about the going rate for George Pickens right now. So this one feels like it's a foregone conclusion. I guess the only question is this: does he stay in Dallas on that? Because we have not seen a good track record of teams holding two high-priced wide receivers and then building out a winning team around that. That we don't have a track record of that with Miami and Cincinnati and the Chargers and a couple other examples, maybe Minnesota here soon. Is it your belief that Jerry Jones will buck the trend and keep both these guys long-term, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens?
I think that's unlikely. I agree with your sentiment. I think he will be back on the franchise tag regardless, but Dallas.
You think he'll sign it, Dan? Because I do think this is a guy that will make some smoke, right?
Potentially too, knowing he just came off a career year. If he signs it, goes back, has a lesser year next year, could create some uncertainty on his market going forward. So, I think Dallas will try and take it year to year as long as they can. And Pickens will try otherwise, but I don't know if he's a holdout candidate or how that proceeds.
I mean, it's Dallas. It's Jerry Jones.
Right.
It's a weapon. It is the perfect recipe for, we're going to slap a 28 tag on you, and we're probably not going to see or hear from you until July 14th, because that deadline to extend him is July 15th. I think at that point in time, we're playing serious hardball with, I think two sides that probably like to play a little hardball here. And I tend to agree with you, but I actually don't think he stays in Dallas. I actually think at the end of the day, there's a late trade of George Pickens, which is the wrong move. It's Dallas doing everything backwards and way too late again. But this might not be the guy you play hardball with, because it did really quickly work out in this iteration with Jake Ferguson. I assume they bring some sort of running game back, maybe even Javonte, and obviously Dak Prescott. I just wouldn't tinker with this too much. If you got to float the guy a 4-year deal with a 2-year guarantee, what's the difference? You do that anyway. You're going to do that September 1st anyway, right? Which is generally how they operate and do business in Dallas. I don't think I'd mess with this one too much. So I'd slap the placeholder on there. I'd let him go out there and do his thing. What you can't do, and there could be some concern here, because this isn't a non-exclusive tag. I would assume it'd be the non-exclusive tag, which if you don't know the difference, we've got a franchise tag tracker where I basically wrote out from A to Z as much as I could tell you about these tags: the transition tag, the exclusive tag. We've got values for what these tags should look like in 2026, and then a running list of every franchise tag situation from the start of this latest CBA all the way through to today. So what does that mean? They slapped the non-exclusive tag on George Pickens. It's about $28 million. He's still able to go out there and hear from other teams, and those teams could make an offer that Dallas would have to match. So it sort of works a little bit like restricted free agency to some degree. And the reason this is an important conversation, I believe, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, George Pickens is far and away the best available wide receiver about to hit the market in March. And And you can certainly conclude some trade possibilities, and maybe there's some Justin Jefferson conversations to be had, and obviously Ayuk is going to fall off in San Francisco, and who knows with Metcalf in Pittsburgh. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but Tyreek's going to fall off, but he's 30 something. But this right now is the targeted player that teams at least have on a big board, even if they don't believe, that he'll be truly available. There's certainly an offer sheet possible here that Dallas may have to contend with. So this one could be fun for a lot of reasons and a lot of ways. And it may just be the boring. They're going to tag him. He's going to hate it. He's going to bitch and complain all summer. And Dallas is going to end up doing the wrong thing in July and August, like they've done so many times here. So definitely one to watch. But I love that it's the Cowboys attached to this one specifically, because it would be very boring if this was just a normally functioning NFL franchise having to make these decisions. I'm going to rapid fire give you 3 more names that are fringe on this franchise tag candidacy list for me. Tight end Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. It's about 14 million. 16 million. It's a little over 16 million based on our projections. He's not a $16 million tight end. All right. That's closing in on top tight end money, which is about 18 to 19 right now. Should get to about 20 when it's all said and done with some of these guys. But if I tell you he's about 10 to 11, making some of the math work in his favor, he's really not. He's more of a 9 because it's been so inconsistent. But I know where things are headed here, especially with Stefanski, and I think you do too. Is it worthy of at least the placeholder to keep him off the market, Dan, at 16?
I think so. And in everything I've heard, if I read the tea leaves right, suggests that they could do that just to kind of keep that offensive nucleus together, especially with the new coaching staff, young quarterback, et cetera. So I think that is one that might get undersold a little bit.
What's fascinating, and what it might lead me to believe that it doesn't go that route, is that Bijan's up for an extension. No, he doesn't need it. This is his first year of eligibility. And Drake London's in year 2 of eligibility. And I think outside of his injury stuff, which has been somewhat prevalent, I mean, he has showed that he is on the fringe of top tier wide receiver play in this league. He is at that mid 30s mark. I think 33, 34 last I look at our valuations. He's right there with, the JSNs of the world, and to some degree the Pukas of the world. Even if I think from an availability standpoint, he's been somewhat limited. So you've got some big time extensions coming onto your books, either right now or at the very worst this time next season. So you don't want to be too aggressive with Kyle Pitts yet, because it hasn't been there outside of a couple of flashes in the pan. But at the same regard, I think both you and I agree, I'd sure like to see him in this Stefanski offense a little bit as well, because it did start to gel last year, and now there's a world where some tinkering that happens this summer could really make things pop if this guy truly is, the TE1 talent that he was drafted to be, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. You've seen tight end heavily utilized during Stefanski's time in Cleveland. I would assume that they want a weapon at that spot.
And here's a different approach to it. It's an overpay, right? But it could be an overpay that would keep him happy for 1 year. So if the point is we just want to make sure that this is going to work with this new regime, it certainly looked good at the end of last year. We're willing to overpay you for 1 year, and you sign this dotted line. And I think you would sign that dotted line, is my point. So maybe it makes the whole process a little less contentious just because you're willing to overpay the guy for 1 season and see how this thing goes, which is actually the point of the franchise tag, by the way, is to make a player happy to stay for 1 more year without sort of holding him hostage. So maybe in this regard, it is the perfect usage of this tag for all parties included, even if it costs, Arthur Blank a couple extra $1 million, and maybe he'll raise the hot dog prices or something. We go to the Jets. Man, I just don't know. I've stopped trying to guess on the Jets. I have no idea where they're headed in terms of what this offense is going to look like, the team as a whole. I thought they made the right moves trading who they did at the deadline. I might have gone 1 more step and moved off of Garrett Wilson for a couple reasons, but I do think you could have really, really generationally set up yourself from a draft perspective to change this thing on the fly as quickly as humanly possible. They didn't. They still could. There's plenty of time for that still. But assuming that free agent quarterback is coming in, Garrett Wilson remains, I like the tight end they got a couple years ago. There's some offensive line improvements that have been made. I think they re-signed Vera Tucker. He's been a worthy interior lineman for them. I mean, they got thin at defense after that trade deadline, so there's plenty of work to do there. And I'm not saying this team's going to be good, but does A plus B plus C plus D get us even close to needing to franchise tag Breece Hall, Dan? Because I'm seeing reports of it. That's why he's on this list.
Maybe I'm way off on this, Reed. The only reason would be like some sort of like punting him down the road to try and recoup some trade value here upcoming, because he is still a valuable player. I don't even know. I guess logistically, I don't even know how that would work out if they're franchising, tagging him this year for a midseason trade. Is that the route? Because he still is a talented back, like probably in his prime year still. There's some value there to me, but the team as a whole is nowhere close to needing that type of player on their roster. So if they can somehow retain him to recoup some additional trade value out of him, I don't even know if that's
I think
correct process.
The only reason you would do it, I think, is if you can get the compensatory draft pick you will get for him right now. You know what I mean? Like if you can make that happen right now for the 2026 draft by slapping a tag on him and trading him off that tag, then you'll do that, of course. He's not a $14 million running back. That's what the tag costs. He's just not. He might get there. There may be 3 or 4 teams. I do believe he's the top running back available when you put, his entire arsenal on the table. But I don't think he's far and away the best available running back. I think there's a world where Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, maybe a couple of bubble players who fall off rosters here are at least viable plan Bs for some of these teams out there. But you want to tell me that, the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Chargers, some of these bigger offensive teams that just need this piece, and I'm missing plenty, he's going to be attractive. There's no question about it. So, where does he stand from a valuation standpoint, Dan? He's a $10.5 to $11 million running back. He's in James Cook, Kyron Williams. We've kind of had this, hamster on a wheel moment for quite a few years now, where we haven't had a breakout big time running back deal in about 3 seasons. And I don't expect one this year either, outside of a Gibbs and Bijan Robinson extension. But he does hang the hat as the top available running back. So I think in that regard, he's worthy of being a franchise tag candidate. It just makes no sense for the Jets to do that for a bunch of reasons. I guess there's only one other way to look at this. If they're not, let me put it in context. I think you would agree with me that this is probably Aaron Glenn's last shot. I think there's a bunch of franchises who don't even let 2026 happen for Aaron Glenn because of the way things went down last season. But he's here. He is on the smoldering hot seat in 2026, which means he needs to build a roster immediately. And while draft picks are a great way to build, it's generally not a great way to build immediately. Okay, it's going to take a minute. If you've got Breece Hall under contract, you're a somewhat more attractive franchise. Is that incorrect? And then when you place him with Garrett Wilson, and maybe you convince Kirk Cousins to come for 1 year, whatever it's going to be, okay? Because these things are all out there. You're just trying to build up your March 11th resume at this point. And I guess to some degree, Breece Hall does that for you. But does it do it enough? Does it do it enough to warrant the pay, the matter, the backlash, the PR mess that could happen if Breece Hall wants to get the hell out of there? He's been a good soldier to this date, but I don't know if he continue to be with all the turnover that's happened here. What do you think?
Honestly, I think you laid, not to punt, I think you laid that all out perfectly, from his value to the route.
But is it worth it for the Jets to even try to use Breece Hall as some sort of free agent attraction piece?
I mean, no, because I think that's all like an uphill battle. And yeah. I guess it's just the organization is
right. You're damaged.
Yeah. And the organization is such a disaster, though, that I have no idea what path they're going to take going forward, from coaching to roster and personnel decisions. So he very well they could just say, we have your rights. We're going to pick up the option. You're going to play running back for the New York Jets in 2026. But I don't think that's necessarily the best outcome for all parties.
I don't get there. I think he walks. I think he's crazy attractive to a bunch of teams. By the way, I miss the most attractive team for Breece Hall, and that's the Chiefs. That's probably the betting favorite for Breece Hall, right? Same exact conversation, but with a team arrow up instead of sitting in the dumpster right now. Is there a world where Travis Etienne gets basically the same treatment? Now, he's not even close to a $14 million running back in our system. Inconsistent, not a third down back. But he also isn't even close to James Cook, Kyron Williams in our system. In fact, he's like an $8 million running back right now, according to our evaluation, for a bunch of funny reasons. Mostly that something has gone right in a year, but there's never been a year when 4 things have gone right for him, which means he's never had like a full resume portfolio season that we could all look to and say, all right, that's the guy that got drafted as a first round pick. And that's why we have to hang our hat on this player. Where's your mindset with him as he approaches free agency? And this Jacksonville team looks like a team on the up and coming here.
Yeah. I mean, from a franchise tag perspective, I agree he's not worth that amount. I mean, I agree with our valuation that he's significantly lower than that. I think he's a talented player. If you're asking me that, it sounds like he pretty much said his goodbyes at the end of the year, as in he thought he would be gone, which is a little bit surprising based on the success that he had with Liam Cohen. Like I know they drafted Bashal 2 in relatively high last year. He looked good in shorts spurts when he was healthy, but I'm getting to like that would be a nice 1-2 punch if they could get Travis Etienne on an appropriate valued contract to bring him in and operate with those two guys. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy you want touching the ball 25 times a game consistently, but he doesn't need to be in that offense, that offensive scheme.
Okay. I do think I agree with you that the end of the year kind of seemed like it was a parting shot. I don't know. I don't think they're an organization that wants to spend draft capital on a running back right now. They have done so much work on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're in really good shape. They've got a Travis Hunter thing to figure out still. So they do have some potential for, expansive offense. I don't think either of us believe that they're starting running backs on the roster right now, though. Do you? Do you think that the development of the other running backs on this team have gotten to a point where he's been replaced yet? Or do you think they're going to have to go out and add 1 to 2 backs, which they would do anyway, but maybe of significance to keep this thing rolling?
I mean, I could see it go either way. I mean, Bashal 2 was the 4th round pick. I mean, is that starting caliber? Maybe not, but it could also suffice for a year. I'm going to punt because I truly could see it going either way. Like Travis Etienne, we have as between 6 and 7 mil per year. I mean, if he's brought back on 3 for 20 with, a middling guarantee, whatever, I think that would be great for all parties is what I'm saying. Like they shouldn't just replace Travis Etienne with Rachaad White at the same price tag is what I guess what I'm trying to say. And I struggle to think Etienne is going to get some massive value deal from some other team, I guess.
I'm with you. Just make it work. Whatever the numbers have to be, put it on a long-term deal so you have some control and some flexibility and to spread things out. But if clearly 2025 is a microcosm of what this team can be from a developmental standpoint, why ruffle too many feathers here? You know what I mean? Add a couple of stealthy pieces, put some depth on the trenches, and see what happens in 2026 with a largely run it back type metaphor. So I'm with you. That's it. I'm out of franchise tag candidates. Now, you want to tell me there's a couple of linebackers? Oh, I lied. I do have one more. But man, it's a stretch. Odafe Oweh, who I like. I talked about him last week a little bit. Went from Baltimore to the Chargers in a player-for-player swap kind of mid-season there, and he excelled. There's only one reason I'm putting him there. Obviously, he's a notable free agent. He's in my top 10 right now in terms of our analysis piece, which I'll bring up here in a second. But I've only got him at about $20 million a year because he really hasn't popped outside of the last 18 months or so. So he doesn't have the track record, the resume to get himself into that top edge rusher conversation, or even close, really. And as a linebacker, which I believe he's going to be deemed a linebacker, I tried to look at his snap counts as much as possible this morning. That's a $27.5 million franchise tag right now. So it's an overpay. However, they lost Bosa last year. They brought back Khalil Mack on a one-year deal. He was fantastic. He's a pending free agent. So in other words, both of their bookend edge rushers in LA are set to hit free agency. I think it stands to reason that one of those two are coming back. Now, you want to just do another year on Khalil Mack and try to find when Father Time's going to catch up to him? That's great. I think everybody involved would be happy there. But this is the guy. This is a 27-year-old edge rusher who's up and coming, getting better every year. Right now, he's relatively, cheap in value in terms of his valuation. There's a world where you slap this, what I would deem to be a little bit of an overpay, because of how much this matters to your roster right now. And it has nothing to do with the salary cap and things like that. You just kind of throw those things away and fix it somewhere else, because positionally, we're just about to lose 19 sacks from 2025, and we can fix that with a franchise tag right here. So I wonder if that's the route. And look, there could be a situation where they throw them on that tag and then take some trade offers and try to reset themselves for the 2026 draft and replace him that way. There's certainly, 9 ways to slice an apple, but I'm going to put him on there because I do think there'll be significant interest, obviously, for an edge rusher that's, shown playoff pedigree and things like that. So I'm going to make him a fringe candidate. So that gives me 6 names, which I think in years past, this was at 15 in early February for most years. I was finding some players left and right and up and down, and we got down to usually 4 to 5 tags. Look, in 2024, we had 9 tags handed out, 8 franchise tags and 1 transition tag. And like I said, last year, 2, T. Higgins and Trey Smith, and both of those players were given contract extensions in the next couple of months. So it's not cyclical. It's just year to year. A lot of it's based on the conversations we're having, which is the money plus the roster, plus where that specific team is right now in their window of contention. And we've got a bit of a mixed bag here. So I think it's fascinating and a little bit captivating as well. I want to quickly flip to some of these free agents, and then we'll talk some baseball and get out of here. I'm going to share my screen. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. Feel free to subscribe and share the wealth a little bit on that, because we're trying to do this as much as possible. And like I said, we'll make some contract video breakdowns coming soon for baseball with some of these bigger ones, and certainly with these NFL free agents and extensions as those hit. So that is coming next. We've launched a new analysis tool on spottrek.com. It is attached to our free agent tracker. So if you've ever gone to our just plain old tracker, which is table-based, look in the navigation for free agent analysis. I've done about 125, maybe a little more now. Basically, not only evaluations, but analyzing descriptions of stats and things like that, and some outcomes that I'm predicting. For those of you looking, you can see that we've got a decently designed here layout that shows previous 3-year stats, the market value we have, what that player earned on an average basis, and their previous contract, and some other bells and whistles to go with it. So brand new view, obviously exciting for us, but also I hope helpful in some of the conversations Dan and I are having right now, which is how do we kind of rank and assess what this free agency is going to look like in a month, and maybe even what these franchise tags will look like in a month, because it's kind of clear just scrolling down here this is ordered by the APY valuation in SpotTrack right now. So that's why Daniel Jones is the first name you see, because he carries a 43 and change valuation in our system, which is right around that franchise tag. Same for George Pickens, 30 million valuation right around that franchise tag. And the list goes on from there. So we can skip those two, Dan, because we've talked about them. Let's just quickly go through like the top 10. Number 3 on this list, I think, is going to surprise some people, because it feels like we've forgotten about him already, despite the fact that for 2 back-to-back off seasons, it's been one of the biggest names mentioned, and that's Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati, who is now over 31 years old. He spent much of 2025 injured, only amounted to 4 sacks and a handful of tackles after back-to-back 17.5 sack seasons in Cincinnati. He does have the franchise tag available, but I don't think Cincinnati is going to slap $28 million on him right now versus just letting him walk and hoping there's a compensatory draft pick coming back to them in 2027. And because of his resume, despite the injury-filled season, he's still a $25 million player in our system, which is way more than we've seen 31-year-olds get, not named Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. Where is this guy to you, Dan? Is this guy the guy who walks onto the Patriots next year or the Ravens next year and just makes hay on a team that is built better, is willing to spend more, and is properly aligned for the playoffs going forward?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the cliff has come, but we kind of talked about this headed into 2025. Just like all of the circumstances around this did not add up to a player that would be motivated
No.
for a monster year. So I mean, I'm not trying to allude to any character things with Trey Hendrickson. It's just it doesn't surprise me that he didn't have a great year last year. And would he thrive in a different, better situation? I would assume he'd still be okay, right?
I definitely think he's chomping at the bit. Are the Bengals going to be good Samaritans finally and let this guy walk into free agency?
I'll throw that to you. What do you think?
I don't think they play hardball again and slap a tag on him because, like I said, it's a big enchilada. And I hope that after back-to-back off seasons of really ugly stuff, that we just get to a point where this guy is past their point of, they shouldn't require his services anymore in Cincinnati. Let's put it that way. If they've done their homework properly, they should be ready to replace their 32-year-old edge rusher, right? If they've done their drafting and their free agent work properly. So I'm going to guess that this is just a clean break. And I do think that's to somebody else's benefit because, look, in a world where this guy stays healthy, and if he's on an organization that is deep enough to keep him healthy, as Buffalo did with Joey Bosa for most of 2025, we can see the payout. We can see the payoff on the field at the right moments for some of these players. And I think he'll be handled that way. So he's going to have to go to a deeper roster. And maybe the $25 million per year payout is a little high. It's certainly what the math is saying. But there's a world where this is one of the bigger contracts this offseason just because of where we are. Now, I don't think Pittsburgh loves the TJ Watt deal. Okay. There's obviously some talk about Max Crosby and the Raiders starting to part ways if that thing's a full rebuild. But for the most part, teams have been pretty smart about age, production, and this position specifically. So it's a fascinating one to watch. But, the math is in his favor still in 2026. We'll see where it ends up. Another fascinating one, Juwan Jennings. This is one of those guys you've been in love with more than most people for a long time because he's kind of a fantasy darling at times. I think you've used him in a lot of your week-to-week day lineups and things like that, and he's sort of won you some money every now and then. What does he look like on just a blank big board heading to a new team, and what does that role become for Juwan Jennings? Can he be more than what he's been in San Francisco?
Well, I think he's closer to the aggregate of how he's performed over all these years rather than not 2 years ago when he sort of spiked for a ton of production.
Yeah.
He's just like a decent all-around wide receiver. I think that's going to kind of be his role rather than some focal point as we saw 2 seasons ago, right? That's kind of the point, the thesis of the point with him.
Would you classify him as a 2, or is that even being aggressive?
No, in the right role, I think that works. But like he was a wide receiver 3 in for a couple of years before injuries kind of necessitated him getting thrust into a more prominent role 2 years ago. So I don't really think there's much more ceiling beyond the number 2.
Is there any world where he returns to the 49ers?
I would be surprised personally. It didn't seem. I mean, he held out last year or got close to it. I don't remember the exact timeline, but Shanahan didn't seem thrilled with that.
Yeah,
it sort of lingered into the year. There were some sort of public shots, references made to that whole situation. So, I mean, it seems like he's gone, in my opinion.
Yeah, and It's just one of those things. And I think we amplify it a little bit, maybe blow it up a little bit too much, but the 49ers need wide receivers. They have for years. Ricky Pearsall obviously was not a plug and play guy for a lot of reasons. The Brandon Ayuk stuff has been a mess for a lot of reasons. This is an organization that is dying for wide receivers. They traded Deebo Samuel this time last year. This is a team that needs wide receivers. This is a wide receiver, and yet none of us believe he's going back to Kyle Shanahan, who we all believe is kind of an offensive genius and has made, a lot of hay out of nothing here and for a lot of iterations, including Jimmy Garoppolo, now Brock Purdy, and et cetera. If Kyle Shanahan doesn't want him or can't find maximum consistent production out of Juwan Jennings, is that going to be a massive red flag for the rest of this league?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
I think he's going to find a nice home. And I do think around this 20 mark is about right for him, especially if there's a team looking to make him the number 2 out there. But I do think there's a little bit of buyer beware in this because of the inconsistency and because he has been asked out loud on fields, we need you to be a number 1 wide receiver right now. And I'm not sure he ever got there. And I'm not saying he needs to be, because there's just 32 of those in the league, let's be honest. But I do think that he has had opportunities to develop into something more. And I think you're right. I think we've seen his aggregate. We've seen his ceiling. And that's going to be how he's valued in this open market, despite the fact that this is not a great list of wide receivers set to become available. I'm going to roll down to one more, because I actually think this is the name that you have your eye on for quite a few of these teams, maybe even the one you're local to there in Buffalo. It seems like the Alec Pierce mark is going to be big. This is a downfield weapon. Now, he's not a complete wide receiver. He's a little bit boomer bust with him, but he did find a really nice hand-in-hand relationship with Daniel Jones there quickly in 2025 for the interim. Is he going to be one of those guys that we are overly surprised at what that contract ends up looking like?
It certainly seems like it, and I can't tell if I'm just like buying into the recency bias and narrative surrounding that, but it does seem like he's like every fan base identifies as him as the guy that they want their team to get. Yeah, which is a little bit surprising to me. I mean, although he is a nice player, I mean, we've seen the track record on these speed merchant type of wide receivers, downfield threats, not necessarily pay off the price tag. But
yeah, the boomer.
I mean, if you're asking me if I want the Bills to sign him to a multi-year deal worth $20 million, I mean, I would pause at that if that's if that's the framework we're using.
It feels a little Christian Kirkish to me, which is, we kind of knew about this guy. He had moments, he had production, so you can understand the resume a little bit, but at that moment, he was valued to be somebody that he just could never live up to. You know what I mean? Like, they paid him into a place of production that he was never going to be able to get to. And good for him. I mean, he ended up sticking it out for years and years and is now probably coming back down to earth for the first time in 2026 in free agency. But, Pierce is going to have significant interest, and generally that means some kind of bidding war. So I would expect this to look like a 4 for 80. Like a 4 for 90 when it's all said and done. 2.5 years of those, practically guaranteed. And I do think it's going to be the big teams. I really, really do. This will be the guy the contending teams look at. And at the end of the day, we'll have to see if Indy can keep themselves involved, because, I mean, you can see the production right there. And that's with half a year of Daniel Jones. He eclipsed basically career highs across the board with a second to third string quarterback for the majority of 2025 down the stretch. So there's ability there. He's got that year that Juwan Jennings had 2 years ago that made us think, oh man, this guy's ready to take it to the next step. And I think the people that look at this stuff a little bit closer, like you do, you understand that that's just not the case. He was put into a position where his boom or bust offered more booms in 2025, right? And as long as he's in an offense that can allow for that, and I by the way, I think George Pickens in Dallas was a very similar conversation. He was put into a situation where he's not the guy, he's the guy benefiting from the guy, which you can make him a WR2, you can make it a WR1B, whatever it needs to be. But at some point in time, there's not enough great people to cover 2 good wide receivers or 3 good wide receivers. So Pierce needs to be identifying that. And that's why I think Buffalo is a terrible choice for him because he'd be looking at a situation where he'd be asked to be the savior at times. And that's not what he's there for. He needs a Michael Pittman. He needs a Tyler Warren, whatever that's going to be, as the way to sort of deflect from the top defenders on the field so that he can be explosive and find space. So it's a long way to say, don't be surprised if that number looks bonkers on March 11th for Alec Pierce, but also massive buyer beware on what you're getting because he's a heck of a player, but in limited form. So we'll see. I'm going to tease the rest of this quickly. Devin Lloyd is sort of the poster child for what has become like a rebirth at the off-ball linebacker position. We've talked about the resuscitation for some of these quarterbacks like Sam Darnold and Baker and those guys. We're having one with these first-round pick off-ball linebackers that all of a sudden now in year 3, 4, 5 have found either a good home or figured out how to slow the game down at that position for them. And they look great. So we're going to have, and by the way, we're going to have players cut. I think Tremaine Edmonds gets cut out of Chicago. We're going to have like 6, 7, 8, maybe Patrick Queen in Pittsburgh. We're going to have really nice names starting, legitimate day one startings, maybe even team captains hit the open market at this position and probably latch on to really nice spots. But, and this is why I'm saying it, yes, Devin Lloyd has played at a $20 million rate over the past couple of seasons here. But if there's 8 guys like him available, he will not make $20 million a year. It's just fact. It's supply and demand. So tons of offerings, maybe even more coming in the bubble situation soon. If you are a team that is in need of one or you follow one, it's going to be a very good year for off-ball linebackers, at least on a short-term basis. And there's your list. We talked about most of these guys here. A couple of names at the end here that, you can do some research on here, but I wouldn't say it's the best year yet. We could certainly use a couple of surprise, shocking bubble releases to make this a more palpable list. But, if I've spent time doing the work on this stuff, that means other people have as well. There are some names that are going to change the game for some teams here over the course of the next 3 to 4 months. And there's one right there, Mike Evans, who I know a lot of the fringe teams have circled off right there. So I'm going to promote one more thing. We'll talk some baseball. We'll get out of here. If any of these names are attractive to your team right now, go to your team on SpotTrack, click Manage Roster. You can update your 2026 salary cap in real time. So you can make all the cuts. We're talking about the trades we're talking about. You can also go and click Add Free Agent, and you can find all of these players, and you can automatically just sign them to the valuation, the market value that we have for them in our system, or you can customize it to something, whatever you think is better. So we've made it really easy to just plug and play these players onto your favorite team's roster, and you can see the immediate impact on the update of the salary cap with all those moves. So it's a really nice time of year to do that. You can also franchise tag players in that system, transition tag players. You can draft now in that system. We've had, I think, 100 prospects for the upcoming 2026 draft. You can make your first round pick and see how that impacts your salary cap. So lots of moving parts, lots of updates, and plenty more coming down the docket from Scott Allen and myself on the NFL side of things. Let's quickly flip the baseball, Dan, because we had some nice news yesterday. I'll bring it up here for those watching. This is the trade that was made. It's a nice one. It is a 3-teamer, which we don't see in baseball too much, and it was inevitable. We knew that the St. Louis Cardinals were going to move the final piece of their offseason puzzle, which was infielder Brendan Donovan. I think both of you and I had Seattle as one of those teams on the list, just because this is one of the more aggressive teams every offseason, and it did seem like they were a couple of pieces away still. Your thoughts on how this all broke down? We had 2 decent-sized prospects go back to St. Louis and 2 Comp B second-round draft picks go back to St. Louis for basically 2 full years of arbitration for Brendan Donovan.
Yeah, on your 3-team trade note, there's been 6. I believe the number is 6 3-team trades since 2023, and the Rays have been involved in 5 of those 6. So it's clearly something they've identified. Bringing in other teams to make or being the third party in other teams' trades to kind of maneuver around their board, as they go. So, from Seattle standpoint, I think it's a valuable piece to lock in. They're still kind of thin at the bottom of their lineup. The top is obviously very
Loaded.
competitive. But beyond that, the bottom it seems a little bit thin. So I would expect there might be another move or two coming. Nothing super major from the Mariners, but I could see some more like depth moves coming there. The Cardinals, like you had said, added two comp round B picks. They're
What are your thoughts on that?
overall,
Because that's not a common thing. What are your thoughts on them going that route with this trade?
it's actually becoming more and more common in recent years, and I'll try and pull some data on this, but it gives the Cardinals a top 5 draft pool now.
Mm.
One of the big things Kyle Bloom was sort of tasked with doing coming into the year was like loading up that they needed to sort of reinvigorate their minor league system. They've added, I think it's like 9 decent prospects in the course of trading Nolan Arenado,
Yeah, I've
Wilson
got it here.
Contreras, Sonny Gray, now Brendan Donovan. They've also, like I just said, like I just laid out, they also have a ton of draft capital to work with now too. So you would think that they're going to really be able to inject some youth into the organization. I mean, does that mean they're going to be competitive next year? Of
No.
course not. But
No.
building for the future is a good thing in this circumstance.
And just to be clear, the comp picks, the comp A after first round, comp B after second round, those are still the only picks that are tradable in this league, correct?
Correct. Yep. And they can only be traded once. So it's not like they can now go flip those in a separate move. They can only be moved one time.
And without getting off on a 9-hour tangent, do you think that's something that comes up in this next CBA? The ability to trade actual draft picks?
Potentially. I know it would. I mean, I know there's a bunch of like thought theories that would be like a really easy way to sort of like gamify the offseason a little bit more like other sports have. It's certainly something that's lacking around the major league draft, but of course there's thresholds. You can only add so much of your original draft pool. I don't even know the downstream effects of if you just like ripped all of those restrictions off and made everything just tradable. That I'm not sure. I haven't thought through those, but yeah, I think it's something that could come up again. As we've referenced, there's a million things on their to-do list. What actually gets tackled and doesn't is TBD, but that might be one that kind of falls outside of the scope of things that get accomplished in that one.
All right. The last one is a big conversation. And I didn't prep you for this one either, but I've been reading about this quite a bit now, and I realize that rosters are about set for this World Baseball Classic. I think Thursday, right? I think the 5th is when rosters are actually finalized.
So I've actually been accumulating these, starting to track them on our website. Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern on MLB Network is actually a reveal show. The bigger teams we have, like Team USA, I think we have 27 of 30 players. The Dominican Republic team, we have 27 official now, still waiting on 3. But even those outstanding 3, like for the U.S., it's likely going to be Mike Trout. We're just sort of waiting on confirmation. Some of the obviously lesser teams we either haven't heard reports on, or it's going to be players we're just not familiar with. But in terms of the MLB, players, it's sort of the teams that you would expect. So,
well, let me tangent off that then, because the articles the reports that I've been reading about, Dan, are the players that aren't going to be there. Francisco Lindor, Jose Altuve, etc. There's about a half dozen notable names, and more coming in kind of every day, every morning here, and it has to do with insurance. And some of that is whatever, political based, whatever, however you want to deal with that. Everybody's insurance premiums have been skyrocketing, but specifically with this WBC, the reason we're here is because of the last WBC, where Altuve and Edwin Diaz suffered massive injuries in that classic right before the baseball season, and their respective teams had to basically deal and pivot quickly because of what happened. So now the premiums to insure these players heading into 2026 have skyrocketed. And we're at a point now where they're just telling players no. I mean, Francisco Lindor, who was not injured in 2025, basically got an elbow scope to clean it up a little bit, which is not nothing. We never know the degree of which those are, but that was enough. That plus his $34 million per year salary for the next 5 years was enough to make the math not work in his favor. And he was told, you're not going to be insured. Carlos Correa, injury prone guy. He was not insured. He can't play. Miguel Rojas for the Dodgers. He's 37 years old. So he was told, we're not insuring anybody 37 plus for the WBC, which is a whole nother enchilada. Altuve, of course, again, was not cleared for insurance. So he will not be joining the team. It's at a point now where Puerto Rico may just bail because they're trying to replace 8 players who got shot down by insurance. And if they can't replace those with players worthy of being there, and they probably won't be MLB players, to your point, they're just going to bow. So we have rosters coming in less than 48 hours, and we may have a team just completely fold out of this thing. And I think the Dominican team is right there. It's Puerto Rico, and I believe the Dominican is also right there. And then not for nothing, this one's pretty obvious, but Ohtani wasn't going to pitch for Team Japan, but he also wouldn't be able to because he did not get insurance cleared to pitch in the WBC because of his obvious history and his salary going forward. So it's a fascinating situation that baseball's biggest players and the highest earning players could be coming into a situation with these things. By the way, the players love this. They want to be playing for their country in this thing. And they've done a really nice job with it. If this hasn't been part of your viewing experience every couple of years, try to make it so in 2026. They do a really nice job. These guys want to be there. And I think they're going to be really pissed off with how this all kind of broke down from an insurance standpoint, which is just more fuel to the fire for this upcoming December 1st mess with the league and the CBA negotiations, because this is a weird look. And at the same time, I get it. I'm completely on board with protecting it because as a Mets fan, it was miserable watching Edwin Diaz destroy his leg, celebrating that championship, knowing he was done for the entire balance of the Mets season. So I get it, but I don't know where we go with this because this is a real thing, right?
For sure. You're totally right. Players do want to be here. Many do want to be here. There is some gray area on the reporting, though. Like there are players who have initially been reported as insurance rejections that were actually more of like some of these are getting reported as injury rejections when they're actually just more of like a player/team agreement that they don't want to go. There are player and team disagreements. Logan Webb is one of them with the Giants. The Giants have publicly said, we don't want you to go. He's basically said, it's my decision. I want to go. So there is some like reporting gray area on some of these players on whether it actually is it. Some are getting reported as insurance issues when actually it's not insurance issues at all. But you are right, as a overwhelming majority, players do want to play in this. There are some that simply, like an all-star game, they don't want to disrupt their spring training process in terms of prepping for the league. So I don't know how this is all going to play out. I mean, a lot of the players that have gotten rejections are high priced players, and or have legitimate injury concerns like you alluded to, which is why you're saying you don't necessarily have a problem with it. Like Carlos Correa, we've heard numerous off seasons, as a free agent, his medicals, the issues with his ankle, etc. So like guys like that, I don't necessarily have a problem with. And some of these other ones are getting initial rejections, and then it's like me and you having insurance. You go and have a procedure done. You think it's covered. You get a bill in the mail a month later, and then you have to call and argue with the insurance company. That's exactly what is happening too, where Major League Baseball is pushing back against the insurance company for some of these players, and they are reversing course. So actually today, I believe at 9 a.m. was the 30-man roster deadline, and then we're going to hear the official reports on Thursday. I feel like today we're gonna get more reports on who did and didn't get rejected for insurance reasons, or got reversal decisions on their previously rejected decision. So it really is interesting, though, that this is like been so dominant of this cycle of the WBC. I mean, I don't think this really happened in 2023 when we saw this last time. So,
all right, that's plenty for today. Appreciate the work. Keep it up at spotcheck.com. Plenty of offseason tools for the NFL now available. The NBA trade deadline is Thursday. Speaking of Thursday, we had another juicy one a couple days ago with DeAndre Hunter to the Kings. And we woke up to James Harden requesting a trade to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because that's what Tuesdays look like now in the NBA. So keep your finger on that one. That one's probably coming down the docket if the reports are true. And we'll see what happens with Giannis, maybe even John Morant over the course of the next 48 hours. Dan, thanks.